So today is the 28th of March, 2022, and the topic for this lecture 5 is farming systems found and promoted internationally. So maybe some additional information. This unit I would consider to be a very important unit. So as students, you can take that to heart. So make sure that you understand the various concepts that are introduced here. And to remember that test number 1 has been rescheduled for this Friday, the 1st of April. So as a country, as a nation, then is looking at how to implement, let's say, a policy of promoting agroecology. They have to look at some ways of how to determine. It can't be difficult to do the whole country at one time. So I mentioned a couple of lectures ago that one way would be to look at and assess and at low growth potential, intermediate growth potential, and high growth potential. That would be one way of that a government could decide on how to go about determining which part of the country to start implementing. Another one is found in this farming systems. So here's a study had been done, and they developed 8 broad categories of farming systems and their characteristics. So again, you may probably look at that. And then within these farming systems, it's not, there's a whole range of it. It's not so clear cut. For example, I would think that in Zambia, we would have number 6, which is a dualistic, mixed, large, commercial, and smallholders farming system across a variety of ecologies and diverse production patterns. But again, even within within the smallholder farming system, there's a whole variety. If you look at in the Luango Valley, for example, it'd be quite different than up in on the Copper Belt. So there's need for seeing what is in your camp area and what can you do there. Now again, the characteristics of traditional agriculture, and this would be a global perspective, not necessarily the traditional agriculture here in Zambia, but there would be an extensive use of local or indigenous knowledge and the spiritual and superstitious beliefs in making agricultural decisions. And I just want to take a moment here to talk about the spiritual side, because I think that that's very important. If we want agroecology to become part of, well accepted, we have somehow to make it part of the culture and part of the spiritual understanding of people. And I'll talk a bit more about that a bit later in my lecture. There's also a heavy use of low-tech tools such as the axe, hoe, and stick, and utilizing methods such as the slash and burn and shifting cultivation, which we call chitemeni here. Use of cattle rearing to create fallow land. So that's when land is used for cattle rearing, it will not be cultivated. And absence of accountability or responsibility to the environment. Now I have to be a little bit careful when I say this, because in the indigenous knowledge, there is responsibility to the environment, but I've also seen, for example, the cultivation of vegetables on river banks, and then the river gets silted up, and eventually the cultivation of vegetables is even done on the bed, the riverbed. So usually the traditional agriculture is very responsible to the environment, but at times it is not. And then also, traditional agriculture usually lacks surplus production. So it's usually just enough for the farmer and their family. And so this is also known as subsistence farming. So how does the traditional agriculture affect the environment? Well, there could be depletion of soil nutrients. For example, in the Chitamini system, that would farmer would cut down the trees and farm there for a few years until the nutrients are depleted, and then move on and come back roughly 15, 20 years later when there's a buildup of nutrients. Deforestation. So I'm thinking they're more of maybe in the tropical rainforest where trees are felled down for agriculture, and soil erosion can be a big issue. That a lot of soil being eroded through wind or water, and once the topsoil is gone, it takes it can take decades to build up the topsoil again. So some of the popular traditional farming methods are agroforestry, crop rotation, intercropping, polyculture, water harvesting, and these are all achieving food security. So agroforestry, I think we all know what that would be. Crop rotation, that's when, let's say, one year a farmer might put sun hemp in a field, and the following year, in the following rainy season, put maize, and then the following rainy season put soybeans. So there's a crop rotation there. Intercropping would be, let's say, in a field of maize, and when the maize is up at knee high, to plant sun hemp in between the rows of maize. So that's the sun hemp would help to feed nitrogen to the maize, and also it'd be utilizing more of the sun so that the sun is not hitting bare ground. And also the roots of the intercrop will also help to feed more biology. Polyculture would be a whole on a farm, and there would be many different crop species. And what we have found is that farmers who are practicing polyculture, especially that's something that would be suitable for the organic farmers, there is some control of the fall armyworm, because the fall armyworm then gets confused because there's so many different scents. So a farmer who's just neighbor to the farmer who's has a polyculture farm might have a heavy infestation of fall armyworm, where the organic farmer who's practicing polyculture might not have any problems with the fall armyworm. Now I see that Memory has raised her hand. Do you want to raise? What is your question, Memory?
So explain again on intercropping.
Okay, so intercropping would be that you would have 2 or more crops on the same field at the same time. So the term intercropping, another term for the same thing would be cover crops. But intercropping would be, for example, you have your main crop that you want to harvest would be, let's say in this case, would be maize. So in between the rows of maize, you would put in, what we have been promoting here for many years now is planting something like sun hemp. So the sun hemp is a legume, so it adds nitrogen to the maize crop as the maize crop is growing. But a farmer could plant many other different types of crops in between. A person could even plant soybeans, for example, in between the rows of maize. So it's planting more than one crop, more than one crop species on the same piece of land in the same season. Whereas crop rotation would be you have one crop, and the year after you put another crop, and then the year after that another crop. So that way you have some control of pests and diseases, and because the residues are different, and the pests would be might not be specific to the following crop. And then water harvesting also could in traditional ways could be harvesting from the roof of houses and so on. So some water is available for a few months. So rather than have to use water from a dug well. Now another system is the traditional. Is the one that's quite common, quite very well known, is the industrial or conventional farming. It's based on the Green Revolution of the 1960s, and more recently what they call the Gene Revolution. Now, the conventional farming system can vary quite a bit from farm to farm and also from country to country, but they share many similar characteristics, such as rapid technological innovation. So the farmers are probably well versed on how to use technology. So they're very quick on adopting new technologies. There's large capital investments required for equipment and technology. There are large-scale farms, usually single crops, because the mechanization makes works much easier on a single crop. And they would have uniform, high-yielding hybrid crops, so that the crop of maize would be mature all within, let's say, 1 or 2 days. It would all be mature. There wouldn't be a great diversity of maturity dates. Great dependency on agribusiness to support the inputs, as well as sales. Mechanization of farm work. So one farmer could work maybe 500 hectares with no outside help. Extensive use of pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. And in the case of livestock, the production is for these concentrated and confined systems where the animal is finished in the last 2 to 3 months and fed a lot of grains. So the positive and negative consequences of the industrial farming system, ecological concerns, certainly a lot of pollution of the rivers, a lot of nitrates and phosphates would erode into the riverbed and causing eutrophication. Also, the industrial agriculture, they would like to say that they can produce a lot of food at a cheap price, but then they don't. When they say that, they don't look at the cost of the ecological costs involved in this type of farming, because then that's passed on, and the taxpayer has to pay for it. And the economic and social concerns, certainly small family farms are no longer the way of farming. I'd say in North America, US, I know, like, even on our farm where I grew up, we might have had maybe 15 farmers. Now there could be even just 2 farmers that are farming the same area. So that means that the small villages that were people that were working in these small villages supporting these farms are no longer viable. And so also this way of farming has an impact on the human health. The food is, we can say it's poison, because this way of farming puts on a lot of chemicals, and that's taken up by the plant, and then we as we eat the whatever the vegetable or the fruit, whatever it is, that's comes into our bodies and then affects our health. So there are philosophical considerations that yourselves as camp extension officers should be aware of. So, certainly not every farm or every farmer in your camp would farm similarly, and I don't think you would want them to do that either. But you have to have an idea of what's possible, and then as you develop the farming system, a kind of a general farming system for your camp, you would want to discuss that with your DACO and the people at the DACO's office. And so it's not to look only at yields, but also to look at the impact on what we've mentioned above here. So what the type of farming that you would be promoting amongst your farmers, what impact would that have on the human health of the farmers, of the consumers, those that are buying the food, and in the long term, what effect will that have on the villages that are nearby that are supporting the farming system? Will it enhance them, or will it destroy them? And also the ecological concerns. Conservation farming is another one that's been promoted quite a bit here in Zambia. And the three principles of conservation agriculture are: number one, minimum or mechanical soil disturbance. So no till or minimum till. So they do the basins, but you don't work the land around that. And or at a larger scale, you can do direct seeding or drilling by drilling or planting. So again, no use of plows, no use of discs. And that's related to what I mentioned in a previous lecture, that every time that you till the soil, you destroy the mycorrhizal fungi hyphae, this whole network of hyphae that brings food to their plant. And number two would be a permanent soil organic cover with crop residues or cover crops. So those promoting conservation farming would say that at least 30% of the crop residue should be left on the soil. So if you're putting your cattle to eat the cover crop, the crop residue, they should not eat everything. There should be something left over, and certainly no burning of the rest either. And then there would be a species diversification. So again, crop rotations and various crops within your farm. So what are cover crops? Cover crops is a very important concept, and it's important that you understand that. It's crops. It's on a field. The crops, a mixture of, usually it's a mixture of crop species are planted to cover the soil, rather than for the purpose of being harvested. So it's a matter of covering the soil to feed the soil biology. Or another way of looking at it, it's an ecological system managed and shaped by humans, a crop grown for the protection and enrichment of the soil. So examples are, there could be a single species, such an annual ryegrass or sorghum, Sudan grass, or here we would have sorghum, something like that. It could be a single species, but usually a better way of doing a cover crop would be a mix of species. I know last year we visited a commercial farmer in Mazabuka, and I think he had 15 different crop species in his field, and that was grown during the rainy season. And then it was the area that he was going to use to plant wheat in the dry season, in the winter. So that mix of crop species would add nitrogen to the soil, and also add a lot of enhance the biology, and the biology then would feed the wheat. So he was able to get 8 tons per hectare of wheat with no insecticide and no fertilizers, just because of that cover crop that he had put in. So for example, in a mix of species, you could have things like cowpeas, and sun hemp, those being and lucerne, those would be legumes, so they would be adding the nitrogen for the following crop. Others like sorghum, sesame, pumpkins. The pumpkin is grows on the ground, so it's capturing any sunlight that might not be captured by that plants that are taller. So what you want to do is to try and capture as much of the sunlight as possible. So there should not be any area on the land that's bare, that the sun can just hit bare ground. All the soil should be covered with a leaf of some sort. So this is very important that you understand the cover crop. So benefits of the cover crop: so it protects the soil during the fallow periods, mobilizes and recycles nutrients. And I should maybe mention as well that when you have so many, say 15 different crop species, you'll have some roots that'll be deep, some are shallow, some are fibrous. So you have a whole range of different types of roots, and each plant will give off a different root exudate, feeding different biology. A cover crop will help improve the soil structure and break compacted layers, hard pans, especially let's say the crop, something like an oilseed radish or something like that. That's a big root, and it permits a rotation in a monoculture. It can be used to control weeds and pests. So if you have a very a thick cover crop that would have maybe at least 8 tons per hectare of dry biomass, that means a very, very thick cover crop growth. As you roll that down, you would not disc that or plow it in, but you would just roll it at antithesis when the seed is starting to or the pollination is starting to take place, and that's when the stalk is at its weakest, and it'll kill the plant by rolling it. And then there'll be a big mulch, a thick mulch, and that will help to control weeds. So cover crops can be grown during the fallow periods, or again between harvest and planting of a commercial crop. So depending if you have irrigation, you've harvested, for example, your winter crop before you plant your rain crop, you might have 2.5 months or 3 months period there that you could grow a cover crop. So again, it's protecting, cover crops are protecting the soil when it does not have a crop on. So protecting the soil from wind erosion. But also what you want to do is to capture all the sunlight that's coming, so that your feed and the plant that's growing there will feed the biology. And then adds an additional source of organic matter to improve the soil structure. It recycles nutrients, especially phosphorus and potassium, mobilizing them in the soil profile in order to make them more readily available to the following crops. And what is it? And the next one here, biological tillage of the soil. So as I was talking, like some of the root crops, especially the cruciferous crops like oil radish, are pivotal and they help to penetrate compacted soils and make the soils looser. A crop like velvet bean also, the roots of the velvet bean will help to make the soil friable. And then utilizing easily leached nutrients. For example, a crop like oats, if you planted oats in your cover crop, it would prevent the leaching of the nitrogen, because the oats would keep that and then keep it for the next crop that would come by. So the objectives of the cover crops is to feed the living biology in the soil, and you do that in order to improve the soil health and thereby increase yields. And it's cover crops will slow erosion, so especially in a place where you're on a slope. So this will help to prevent erosion. It improves infiltration, and I think that's a very important point. I remember about 2 months ago looking at seeing on the social media when they were having such heavy rains in Choma, and the water was just flowing across the fields. I thought at first it was a river, but no, it was just the fields, and the water was not able to infiltrate because the ground is so hard, the water cannot infiltrate. So you want to be able to, any rain, even a very heavy rain, you want all that water to infiltrate into the ground so that it's available for the plant, for the crop later on. Also to fill up the aquifers in the ground. Cover crops to smother weeds and helps to control pests and diseases by attracting beneficial insects, because within so we're running out of time here. I'll have to go very quickly, but anyways, this will be on the my presentation will be on the portal. So in case I don't finish the presentation, Memory has her hand raised. Yes, Memory. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Brother Paul, to take you back. Explain a little bit again on benefits of cover crops.
The benefits. Benefits
Yes.
of cover crops. Let me go back to that one. So, okay, is there anything in particular that you don't understand there?
Just on improving the soil structure and breaking compact layers and hard pans. You should explain that point.
Okay, so for example, many of the soils are compacted because of the way we've been farming, especially using mineral fertilizers, especially the potassium compacts the soil. And so by putting in a cover crop with certain species in it, that will break up the compacted layer and the hard pan. So rather than have to come in with a ripper, for example, you've got the McGoy ripper or the rippers behind tractors. So rather than doing that with mechanically, it can be done biologically. And then other species that you might have in that cover crop could be something like I mentioned, velvet beans. And the year after, after you've put in the velvet beans, the soil is very friable, very loose. Okay, so I'll move on here. We have 7 minutes left here. So so the idea and the idea too with the cover crops is to increase farmers' incomes. So you want to by improving the soil health, the yields will increase. There will be less cost to the farmer, and hence more money in his or her pocket. And then the effects of crop rotations. Would be let me just see where I'm at here. So would be the higher diversity in plant production, and that's in human and livestock nutrition. So both ourselves as humans and livestock would have a higher diversity, a more diverse diet. Also, this a greater distribution of channels or biopores for created by the diverse roots. And so that again would help when there's a rain, that the water would be able to go down. Also, it's a place for earthworms and so on to move about in the soil. Increase human formation. I think the rest you can probably read there. I think it's pretty straightforward. Permaculture. Okay, the thing about permaculture is an intentional system of agriculture. And it draws from several disciplines, including organic farming, agroforestry, integrated farming, sustainable development, and applied ecology. Now, permaculture the true permaculture would have 6 zones. So zone 0 would be around the farm, around the house, and that's where you'd have your vegetables. And so any water left over from when from the household would be thrown on the vegetables there. So it's not, you don't have to walk very far. And zone 5, which is the last zone, would be where you would have your trees and so on. So I won't go through all these principles here because of time, but the main principle there would be to observe. And I think as an organic or an agroecologist farmer, you want to be very observant, because look at nature, see what nature is doing and what it's saying. That will make you a successful organic farmer. And then so value diversity. For example, the conventional or industrial agriculture is just the opposite of that. It lacks diversity. So what you need is diversity. Natural farming is another name that is coined by a Japanese, and it became famous in 1975 with his book called The One Straw Revolution. A lot of these different types of names here of farming system, there are similarities within them. So, okay, now this one here I think is very important for us here in Zambia, the community managed natural farming as promoted in Andhra Pradesh. So if you could have a look out even on the internet and see what they're doing there. And what they're moving towards is what they call a 365-day crops growing. They have basically the same type of climate as we do, 4 months of rain and then the rest is dry. But they're working, trying to have crops growing year round without irrigation. And I think that's something we want to try and do as well. And I think at this point now, just as you're coming to the end of the rains, if some of you have the ability to put together maybe 10, 15 different species, crop species, even if it's on an area even the size of a table and so on, just to try it, but measure how much you're putting of each species so that you have an idea, so that you don't have too many of one species and the other. And I would like to know, if you do that, your feedback, because I would think that you will probably get 2 to 3 months, even 4 months of growth, even though you're going into the dry season. And so if we can get an extra 2, 3, 4 months of growth, that would be good for feeding the biology, but also to have something to feed the cattle at that time in the cold season when it's hard to find good food for them. And that's when they need good food. And they have what they call a champion farmer in each village, which is what we would refer to here as a lead farmer. But I mentioned very early on in this presentation that it's important to kind of incorporate this agroecology within the culture. And I think they've been able to do that in Andhra Pradesh. I think 100% of the people there in Andhra Pradesh are Hindus. So when they go to a field, they take a moment or two to pray. And so it's linked to the spirituality is linked to their culture, to their farming and so on. And they're getting hundreds of thousands. I think they're working on towards a million farmers within a few years adopting this system. Biodynamic farming is not, that's very different than organic farming. It takes into account the ecological and also ethical considerations. It's quite common in Germany and Austria, not so much across the world. And there's a spiritual focus to this way of farming, so that's kind of the thing. And then there are also special preparations. So you use these preparations, use them in horns of cattle and so on. Regenerative agriculture is getting very common in USA. I only have 1 minute left and I won't be able to finish the slides, but so I'll just move very quickly. But regenerative agriculture, you want to read up about that. That's very, very good. It's not organic, but the principles are a good way to get farmers to move into organic agriculture. So organic and agroecological farming are quite similar. The agroecological farming is an overarching holistic concept, but it includes organic but organic can have certification. Agroecology as such does not have certification. So the practices of agroecological farming includes such things as diversification of crops. It certainly, what we're talking about, cover crops is there. Green manures,